selling land versus selling a house in Georgia. Hey guys, this is Brad from NorthGeorgiaLandBuyers.com and Arborview Properties. So today I'm going to talk about the difference between selling land versus selling a house. Selling land and selling a house are two very different animals. I've been a real estate investor and real estate agent for a number of years. I actually have my license with One Source Real Estate in Woodstock, Georgia. I'm a licensed Georgia agent, have been for a number of years, and I'm also an active investor and developer. We buy single family properties, we buy commercial multifamily, we buy land, all of the above. We've kind of done it all over the years. So today I'm talking about kind of the differences between the two. Okay, so they're very different things. Selling a house is kind of easy, right? Selling it, you got the house there, right? That it is what it is, right? Okay, well, there's a house there. Now, sometimes a house could there's potential to maybe tear down the house and build a bigger house, or you tear down the house and turn it into a commercial property or that sort of thing. But generally speaking, when you're selling a house, you're selling kind of a single family residence for some person or family to move into this property, right? That's kind of the gist of it, right? You can kind of understand. Now, this person can opt to expand the house. They can keep it the same. They can remodel it. They can keep it exactly the same. Like, there's so many possibilities, right, for a house, but it's all pretty straightforward. Kind of people know what they're getting, right? Land, when you're selling land, that's a whole different ballgame because there are so many different possibilities with land. There's different types of land. You have to know the zoning. What can you do with the land? What will the county or municipality allow you to do with that land? Is it agriculture land? Is it only good for hunting? Is it timber land for like harvesting trees, which nowadays in 2024, some people are like, oh, I'm going to sell this land for trees. Like, timber companies aren't really buying trees right now. They have a lot of trees to harvest already, and they're not going to pay much for it. Based on the prices of the lumber is going to kind of dictate when timber companies are going to do harvests and that sort of thing. So, and that's a whole different niche business that I'm not even going to get into in this video. Now, let's also talk about, is this land, can it be residential land? Like, can you build a house? Can you build a neighborhood on it? All of that is going to be determined by a few things. Access to utilities, electric, maybe natural gas, maybe you don't have natural gas. Electric's a huge thing. Getting power to this property to get electricity is a lot of money to actually run power to a property. You'd be surprised at how much that actually costs, depending on how far you're away from, sort of a transformer or from a main line or that sort of thing. It can cost a lot of money to get electricity to a property. Depending on the terrain you have to get through, that all affects that. Getting water to the property. Is there a municipal water source nearby? Is there, can you drill a well? Okay, well, a well can be a crapshoot, right? Your neighbor could drill a well and he could hit water in 200 feet. And in your property, you might have to drill 600 feet. You just never know, right? So can you get water to the property? Because if you're going to put a dwelling on this property for someone to live in, they're going to need, a water source. They're generally going to need electricity, and they're going to need sewage treatment, whether that is an on-site sewage treatment system, aka a septic system, or that is a municipal sewage source, right? Maybe there is public sewer nearby. All of those cost money, and all of those require approval by the state. If you're doing an on-site sewage treatment system, which is a septic system, that has to be approved by the state of Georgia. Depending on when your property was originally platted out, may or may not grandfather you into the old or the new septic regulations, but current septic regulations in the state of Georgia require, give or take, an acre of gross usable area in order to have a septic system. So if you have a property that does not have public sewer or water nearby, and you are trying to sell it for someone to build a residence, and that property is less than an acre in size, you might not be able to put a septic system on that, depending on when you platted it. Now, the rules changed years ago for that. You used to be able to kind of do these on like a half-acre lot, but that's kind of changed over the years. And now, basically, give or take, you have to have an acre. I think it's like 0.92 acres of gross usable area, which means you might have portions of your property that aren't in that calculation of that gross usable area. There could be a portion of your property that you, for instance, maybe you have like a lake or a pond on the property. They're not going to calculate that into the gross usable area. And you have to be a certain distance away from water sources in order to put in a septic system. There has to be a certain distance away from those sources of water, whether that's a spring, a creek, a stream, a lake, or whatever. Springs have a certain distance, generally that's 100 feet. And then if you have an existing well on the property, you cannot put a septic system within a 150-foot radius around that well. My own house, my own property had a well on it, and where we were building our house and where our septic system we needed to put in, where it was going to be within that 150-foot radius of this existing well. I wish I could kept the well. I would have used it for irrigation, but I couldn't, and I had to abandon that well. And it cost me $4,000 to abandon this well because it has to be done a certain way. It has to be done by an authorized, party to be able to do this. They have to follow a process, and they give you a letter certifying that they did this the right way in order to properly abandon that well. So that's something to think about if you're selling a property, is access to water, access to utilities, public sewer, for instance. For example, when I built my personal house, there was a public sewer kind of down the road a little ways, but it was cost prohibitive for us to connect to sewer, so we opted to do a septic system. It was going to cost me $60,000 to basically run a pipe extension and a manhole and all of it. We talked to an engineer about this, and it was going to be $60,000 to run sewer versus a septic system on my property was like $8,000. So what do you think I'm going to go with? I'm going to go with the $8,000 option, not the $60,000 option to connect to sewer, right? So all that costs money. And then you also have to think about selling your land. You have to think about your topography of your land. If you have a piece of land that's like this, what is it good for, right? I mean, it might have a beautiful view, and that's one thing, right? But if no one can build on it, typically it's going to have less of a use. Is it hunting land? Well, you're going to need, whether you're a hunter or not, you're going to need someone who's a hunter to kind of tell you whether this land is good for hunting, right? Maybe there's never any wildlife on it. There's probably wildlife, right? But there could not be, right? So you need that assessed. And I mentioned also timber stuff. You're going to have a timber expert on that, tell you whether that's, viable for timber. So there's all these different things and these variables that go into play with your land. What is it currently zoned? All of these things are going to affect, the usability and the viability of your land and what you can sell it for, right? Improved land is always going to sell for more money than unimproved land. And the reason why is because it costs money to improve land, right? If you got to get grading and take trees down, all of that costs money to grade properties out. Maybe there's drainage issues. Maybe you have a creek or a stream. Creeks and streams, depending on whether, they fall under the realm of the EPA. If you have to get the EPA involved, depending on, whether your creek or stream is a navigable water. And there was a recent Supreme Court case that kind of smacked down the EPA for overstepping their bounds a little bit as to what they were defining as, bodies of water that were under their purview. And if you're under their purview, it's a whole different ball game. And if someone wants to do anything, for instance, I had a buddy who built a house, and because of the creek that was in front of his house, he wanted to put a culvert pipe in, and he had to go through the EPA, and it was going to take like 6 months to go through their approval process. And it was going to cost him a lot of money because he had to hire a third-party civil engineering company to spec all this stuff out. And they had to do all these studies and all these things. It was cheaper for him to build a bridge over this creek than it was for him to put the culvert pipe in. He was able to build a bridge over it, and as long as he stayed within X amount of distance back from the creek, and he could build a bridge that spanned that distance, he didn't have to get the EPA involved, and he could just go through county environmental. And that's what he did, but it still cost him a lot of money. He ended up spending like $50,000 to build a bridge to be able to access the back portion of his property, which is where he wanted to build his house, because the front was kind of a low-lying kind of area, and he didn't really want to put a house there. So it costs a lot of money to do that sort of thing. So those are the things you have to think about if you're selling land versus selling a house. It's much simpler, much easier to sell a house than it is to sell the land. So if you are selling them, I did another video about how to sell your land. You got 3 options. You can sell it by yourself. You can consult a real estate professional like a broker or an agent to sell the land for you, or you can sell to an investor or developer such as myself. Now, I'm an agent and I'm an investor developer. So if you're interested in selling a property, you like to talk to us about your property, know how much your property is worth, what we might offer for it, what you could do with it, what you can't do with it, that sort of thing. We'd be happy to explore that with you if you go to northgeorgialandbuyers.com, or you can click on the link below in the description and fill out the form there on our site. We'd be happy to have that discussion with you. So thanks for checking out this video today. I hope it was helpful. We have a whole bunch of other videos on our YouTube channel and over on northgeorgialandbuyers.com. So feel free to check those out. Maybe they'll answer some of your questions. Thanks again for checking out this video. I'm Brad. Hope you have a nice day. Bye-bye.